We're in the studio right now getting ready to do some tabletop photography, but it's important to get your camera prepared for that. In the past, camera profiles were something that just came with the camera, and to try to do one on your own was very much an impossible thing, or very, very hard for the average photographer. Now, we can do camera profiles so easy, it really takes all the guesswork out of it, and in a sense prepares the file, so we have a lot less work to do with the file. It's about getting the color relationships proper. I've got a color passport made by X-Rite set up on the set. Today we'll be using the Canon 1DS Mark III camera. You see that I have it literally tethered to the computer. We're using a Mac laptop computer, and we are using the simplified software that comes with it. It's simply the Canon utility software that allows this camera to connect to the computer. We're coming out of a USB socket out of the camera into the USB of the computer, so that every file coming out of the camera will be able to see the files instantly on the screen. Now, yes, you can see the shots on the screen in the camera, but that's not a profiled monitor. So we've had the screen profiled on the laptop, and we're going to get the very, very best image we can. It's all about the control, and that's what this first lesson really is. How do we start by getting control? We're going to get a profile in the camera. Now, I have a basic studio lighting that we have, a top light. We are using two mono lights. They are ProPhoto light. They are Pro lights from Aurora. And they're both 300 watt-second lights, and we are going to have a basic setup. A lot of the shots we'll be doing in the lessons are going to be set up with two lights. We use one light to light the background, another light to give us the dimension. You don't want to just use one light, even though I know there's one sun and we want it to look like one light. As many times as we can, we want to try to not make one light do too much work. So we're going to use a lot of two lights and fill card type setup to give us the dimension. I've got the passport is actually set up with a standard X-Rite color checker, which has been around. It used to be the Macbeth color checker, and now we have all the grayscales, the skin tones, the basic RGB, CMYK, but it has this extra palette here that allows us to not only to do a neutral white balance, but allows us to warm up the colors and to cool down the colors once we get what neutral is. The key thing is we need to know where neutral is that we can make an informed decision. So when we photograph this, we want to get it lit very, very evenly, and we want to use the light source that is appropriate. So in this case, we're making it for studio strobe lighting. If we want to get real critical about it, we want to make one for outside sunshine. We want to make one for tungsten lighting, any type of lighting we have. So I carry this in my case everywhere I go, and if I get into a very unique lighting situation, I will shoot a specific profile just for this situation. So we have it all set. We notice that we are tethered. We are running it off the power here, so we're getting constant power. We don't have to worry about the camera shutting down. And we have all our controls right here on the computer. We're on a manual exposure. We're set for 100 ISO, and we have a f-stop of f18, and we're shooting at 1/100th of a second. We try to keep our shutter speeds in the studio to be 1/25th or less when we're using a synced strobe. That way the shutter doesn't close before the strobe has a chance to go off. I have the imagery is all set up to go right into its own folder, and I have that folder being monitored by the bridge. That's my preferred workspace. I really like shooting into the bridge specifically because I can easily click on one photograph, do a Command R or Control R on the PC, and be able to open that right up and look at my RGB numbers. I'm very, very concerned on the 0 to 255, those 256 numbers for an 8-bit output file. Commercial photography is about proper output, proper numbers for reproduction. It's not about getting the prettiest color and the most saturated color. It's about getting the most accurate color. Now, when we just use a profile that comes with the camera, yes, it gets the gray correct because we can neutralize it, but we want the relationships of these colors to be accurate, and that's what doing the custom profile will do. So I want to come over here. We're all refocused. We are using, in this case, the Canon 90mm tilt shift lens. This is my #1 lens that I use in the studio. And my favorite combination with that we'll be using on some other shots coming up is adding the 1.4 teleconverter, which makes this into a 135mm tilt shift lens. This is very, very close to when I was shooting 8x10 film and I was working with say a 400+ lens on an 8x10 camera. That gives me the same kind of look. And by having the tilt and shift and swings on this particular lens, it gives me as much control as I had when I was using a view camera on film, and that's what we need, is control. So I'm going to go ahead and fire the shot. I'm going to we probably always use a cable release so we have less vibration on the camera, and that looks like it's a fairly good image. We want the checker to be at least 15–20% of the image. You can't let it be too small. I like to have it really about 30 or 40% of the image, and you don't have to be perfectly square, but it helps to be a little square. I'm looking at that. That's actually pretty good. To double check it, I will just click right here in the bridge, and I'll do a Command R or Control R. The reason why I prefer doing right into the bridge, say, rather than you can shoot right into Lightroom, is I prefer the 0 to 255 numbering system than the 0 to 100. That's just something that's personal. It's from many, many years of knowing where white with detail and where black with detail fall. I want to make sure that I'm reading the 0 to 255 numbers. So I can come down here and look at that, and I'm reading my white patch. It's got a pretty nice white. We're in about 226, and the black is reading down here in the 40s. Now, I don't have to do any adjustments on camera raw. And in fact, I don't even have to do a white balance because it's going to ignore all that XMP data. It's just going to use the raw data to create this. So what I want from here is, if I'm happy with that, don't do any sliders. I'm just going to save the image, and I'm going to save the image as a DNG. And I'll just name it here, and that's all we need. So that is going to be the name of the particular profile. So that DNG has now been saved, and we'll be able to go back in and open that inside the Color Passport software to create the actual profile. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have this image right here, this sort of box where the file is going to go. I need to go into my pictures now, and I will open up the folder. Now that I have the folder open, I can see my new DNG file that I created, the Canon 1DS Mark III. I've got my software for the Passport open right here. It has a fairly large area right in here, the big broad area. We're going to just take the file and drag the DNG file into this area, and we're going to locate the part of the chart that it's going to need to create its custom profile. Now, more than just a white balance, we're not talking about, we know we can do a custom white balance, and that's something we've always done, but we're talking about the relationship from one color where, yes, we get the gray right, but two blues that might have been similar are going to now be much more separate if that's what it takes to get that color right. So it's about getting the file prepared before we actually move any sliders or add any extra contrast and do our enhancements. We want to try to get this file right. So these little green dots find the four corners right here in the software and allows us to say, it puts the boxes so it's reading each of these patches for the grayscales, the RGB, the CMYK, skin tone, whatever, and then it says create profile. And it's going to create a profile, and it's going to read each one of these colors. It's just like anything with color management. It's going to compare what it is reading to what it knows it actually should be. It looks at those two different, finds out what the difference is, and puts that in there. So if it knows this particular blue color needs a few more points of red to make it the right kind of blue, it's going to add that in there so that we have the proper color set up from the very, very beginning. So I tend to, just to be safe, go ahead and always restart Photoshop up again so that that profile will be loaded into the Camera Raw engine as it starts up. So we're pretty much set to go here. Let's go ahead and open that DNG file actually in Photoshop. I will drag that down into my Photoshop icon. We can open Photoshop up now. Of course, it also puts it in Lightroom as well. It knows exactly, they all share the same engine, so they all know where to get the same profile files. As we can see that opening up here. And the very first thing that we're going to do is, we can see as shot, we're not going to worry about anything to do with the custom white balance at this point. We're going to go right over here to where the camera profiles are, and we're going to go down here. It says now we have the ACR 4.4 and 4.3. Of course, we have all the individual profiles that come with this particular camera, and then here's some of these new profiles that I've just made. The one that we made today is the Canon EOS 1DS Mark III #2 profile. When I click that, we should see instantly, if I go back, I'm going to do that again so you can see the difference, is I go from the ACR 4, boom, how weak and unsaturated those colors are, and how some of those blues are almost the same blue. And as soon as I go to the 1DS Mark III profile, watch what happens to the blues, boom, and the reds. It jumps into place. We're getting incredibly good, saturated, proper color before we clicked on the white balance. Now, we still have to do the white balance in the actual photographs because we have to tell it where neutral is. But now it knows the relationships of these colors. This is going to take out so much work in the processing of these files that when we're in Camera Raw, by starting this as the very first thing we do, we'll find that we're moving those sliders around very, very lightly compared to just shoving everything in curves and sliders and trying to get this camera to look, the image to look proper. We're going to get it right from the beginning. Now, we can always run around and try, you know, different ones as well, the portrait, the neutral, the landscape, to see what kind of effects we have. But in commercial photography, accuracy is everything. We want to be able to say, yeah, we can make that color more saturated, but we want it accurate. If we're doing Coca-Cola, it's got to be Coca-Cola red. If we're doing IBM, it's IBM blue. We want to make sure that these colors are exactly the way that the manufacturers understand them, and this is the only way we're going to get that. So this is the first step we do. It's going to take a lot of the work out of our photography.